Hi, everybody. My name is Justin Foxton, and I'm here today with Tegan Devar, MD and co-owner of South African organizational and people development consultancy PeopleSmart. And we're going to be having a conversation today about a recent piece that Tegan's just had published. Hi, Tegan. Good morning.
Hi, Justin. Good morning.
Nice to be with you. So let's just jump in here. You published an article. It's up on the PeopleSmart LinkedIn page. It's up on the PeopleSmart blog on peoplesmart.global. But it's also been published in a couple of quite influential publications. And we decided that we were going to have this conversation because it is so topical and it is so relevant. And this is on the generation gap that seems to be plaguing so many organizations at the moment, and leaders are really struggling to navigate this gap. So you've written this very, very interesting piece. It's called Supporting Young Leaders in the Workplace, How to Bridge the Gap. And a line that struck me, of course, because I'm of a slightly older generation than you are, is if you're tempted to say, back in my day, we did things differently, then this article is definitely for you, and this video insert is definitely for you as well. Why such an interest in this topic at the moment?
Thank you, Justin, and welcome to everyone who's watching this recording. It was very interesting how this evolved. I was encountering many leaders through coaching, and they were sharing with me, often older leaders, sharing with me that they were struggling with their predominantly younger workforce. And all the stereotypes came out when they shared that with me, young people constantly on their phones, or young people being not afraid to just share how they feel, or expecting, instant gratification for things to just happen and want the promotion immediately, or leaving the workspace sooner. All the common stereotypes were coming up. And so leaders were struggling with that. And at the same time, they were thinking about, as older leaders, how do I leave a legacy? And I want to give back, but I just don't necessarily know how to do that. How do I begin doing that? So there was that dynamic. And at the same time, I was engaging with young people through mentorship, and they were sharing their views about entering workspaces and sometimes feeling really unsure about what to do or how to navigate it, or how do I ensure that I'm visible, or how do I seek support, or, it just seems tricky to navigate in the world of work. So you have these key elements of, leaders wanting to give back, wanting to leave a legacy, wanting to connect with young people, and young people wanting to as well. I think in this digital age, young people bring so much of energy and skills that they can also pass on to many employees in organizations. And so I realized that, okay, this is something that we're not talking about enough. We need to be talking about it. And how do we create spaces in organizations to bridge that gap? How do we help leaders across generations to say, how do we create spaces where we can learn from one another, where we can mentor and support one another, where we can harness the skills and experience across generations?
But this is very interesting to me, because if you look back throughout history, there have always been gaps between generations. I mean, I think that line, back in my day, is quite a common line across most generations. But this particular generation gap, and let's define it for a moment. We've got that kind of millennial generation, which I know you're a part of, and then we're working now with the Gen Zers. And then there's this big gap to where perhaps I'm working, which is in my middle age, in my 50s, right? And this gap seems so much bigger than any gap that's existed in other periods of history. Now, and so my question, is it bigger? Is that just a perception that we have? Or is it real? Is this a bigger gap? And why? Why would there be such a huge gap existing?
So I think you're so right. This is not a new question that has been asked. And this is, for generations, we always say, oh, back in my day. But I think what's unique in this context is that we have a cohort of young people that have grown up with technology and social media. And so they don't know a world without that. And so that shapes every area of our lives, our relationships, how we engage, how we connect, how we share information, how we play. If you think about, I think about video game, streaming services or entertainment in general, it's shaping the entire world, AI as well. It's shaping all those things, and that's unique. And so you have young people who are coming into a workspace where that workspace might not have caught up to that just yet. And so they are struggling to navigate that. And older generations are struggling with understanding it and also navigating it as well. And so how do we meet halfway? How do young people bring that energy and skill set to the workspace and share that knowledge? And how do all the employees embrace it, share their skills and experience on how to thrive within a working context? And how do organizations harness that so that they become adaptable in the world of work? Because organizations that do that, young people is where it's at. And in a context that in South Africa, where 70% of young people are unemployed, the organizations that are going to harness that are going to be the ones that thrive.
There seems to be this other dynamic at play here where expectations of work from older generations are quite different to the expectations of the workplace for younger generations. And it's, whereas perhaps 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, the idea would have been go into a job, get your salary, make sure the boss is happy, work there for 30 years, get the watch, and that's the end of it. But when I've been speaking to younger people, it seems to me that the priorities are different. Like, for example, feedback seems to be such an important issue to young people. The working conditions are so important. Whereas 50 years ago, we didn't get to question whether working conditions were good or bad. We just accepted it and got our salary. So what are some of the things that you're noticing are the real issues beyond just money for young people that the older leaders ought to be thinking about when they deal with the younger generations?
I love how you said that, it's beyond money. And for many young people, yes, that's important, but it's not the only thing. It's how is work meaningful to me? Is it contributing to a broader goal? You talk about planets and in the environment. Is it contributing to something bigger? Service? Is it aligned with our values? I think that's important as well for young people. It's not just work. Is it aligned to what I believe is important? That's important as well. Do I feel that I have the space where I have voice, where I can try and I can fail at something? And I will have the support so I can experiment with things, because that's going to allow young people to build confidence. You spoke about feedback, and I think, yes, it applies to young people in this context, but I think to everybody, that if we don't get feedback, we're not going to know what we're doing right and what we need to work on. So it really is, feedback is a function of respect. And if we are unable to give that feedback, we set people up for failure. Especially for young people now, it can be really motivating. It gives them structure. As a leader, if you can give regular feedback, and I'm not talking about your biannual performance review. It's that ongoing coaching feedback. Hey, you did really well here. How about trying this? Let's talk about, the project that you just did. What do you think went well? What do you think we can work on? How can I support you better? It's having those regular conversations to enable young people to see, okay, build confidence. I can do this. I got direction about what I can work on, and providing that structure. I've encountered many young people who say they come into the workspace, they do the regular induction, and then they just feel they have to sink or swim. Nobody's teaching them the norms of that organization. Standing around the coffee station and chatting to them. Hey, do you know about this? Do you know that we do this on the side? Would you like to volunteer here? This is what's available. This is how this is how we do things around here. Sometimes it's just teaching those norms. There was an example of a young person who said she was just so afraid. She didn't even know how to use the printer properly. And so it just talks about the gap in workplace knowledge, and how do we pass down those norms and that knowledge and experience to young people.
So if I was an older person listening to this, I might listen to this and go, this younger generation, it's a bit soft. We didn't have anybody to show us the ropes. We were always just chucked in the deep end. They toughen up, get a grip. What would you say to those older leaders who might just feel that we're having to work so hard to keep this younger generation happy and comfortable and all of that? What would you say to them?
I think that's a great question, Vince. It's something that I often encounter. And one of the first things I share with leaders is, okay, step back and just adopt a learning mindset. So what can I learn from this younger person? And kind of be open about that. Because I think immediately when you say, oh, this is so exhausting, oh my gosh, now I'm going to have to spend time teaching this person, we already put up a barrier. So that would be one of the first things I'd share with leaders. And then the second thing is understanding that young people do not necessarily come from or have it easy in this context. They navigate in a highly competitive context. A lot of generation entering the workspace today would have experienced COVID and would have had to either study through that, work through that, navigate that. That is challenging. A lot of young people grow up in homes where they deal with a lot of trauma. We're not talking about that and need mental health support, but that's not to say that young people aren't resilient and aren't finding ways. So I think that this perception that young people are soft or, had it easy or instant gratification with technology, I think we have to really challenge that. And I think that young people are navigating a lot of things in a fast-paced and changing environment and are quite resilient. And so how do we build that? The other thing I would say to leaders is how are we communicating what we are expecting within organizations? And so how do we ensure that we let young people know that we want proactive problem solvers, we want individuals who ask for help, who give ideas, who find spaces where, hey, I'm going to try this, I'm going to give this a go. That's what leaders are looking for. They're looking for proactive individuals that say, yeah, choose me. I want to give this a try. And so for young people to know that and for them to also practice that is important.